is Elizabeth LaPrelle, and I am from southwestern Virginia, and I sing, I perform, and I study and I teach Appalachian ballads, and I also dabble in a lot of other arts, so I'm an artist. Oh boy. So defining old time music is hard for me. I think it's very, very broad. And I think I'm sure there's other people that might know better, but I think old time music, like these terms kind of arise when there's a need for them, kind of like the term folk music. We didn't really need that term until there started to be something that wasn't folk music, like maybe pop music or maybe a very academic or specific style of music. So I'd say the same for old time music. So I think people use those words to kind of refer to music being done the way that it was done a long time ago. Like it's the old way. And if we're talking about singing, which is, kind of my area, in Ireland, they have a phrase for this too, for the old style of singing. It's called sean nos. And it just means the way people used to do it. It's in part of what you were saying, that it is a male-dominated field, and music in general is a male-dominated field. And really, like a lot of fields are male-dominated fields. And I think in general, women in old time, like a lot of areas, they've been doing it for a long time. It just hasn't been noticed or brought to the forefront or maybe brought out on tour or onto a stage quite as often. So women have been talking about ballads, which is what I love. Women have been singing ballads and passing them on, teaching them for a really long time. They haven't always been doing that on stages or, at universities or things like that. Sometimes it's been in the home. Sometimes it's been, in a small community. And even just besides that, even when women have been doing groundbreaking work in this music as recording artists, as performing artists, sometimes they're not getting as much attention in retrospectives or collections or things like that as their male counterparts. So it is really important. And like the third reason is that I can say from my own experience, the more women I saw modeling, doing this kind of music that I'm really interested in and that I love, the more women I saw getting out and doing it in different ways, the more I felt empowered to do it. So when I saw Rhiannon Giddens like playing banjo and singing ballads in front of people, that made me want to also get out there and start learning banjo and perform more. And that kind of modeling, when girls see it, is really impactful. In old time, I'm going off of anecdotes, partly from what singers have said in interviews or have written about, or stories that are kind of shared among other musicians. But I think when you hear these interviews, people are talking about it being harder to get a gig as a woman, harder to get people to play with you. Thinking of Hazel Dickens and her work. And she was very outspoken about, all the gigs were bar gigs at night. And people made so many assumptions about what kind of person she was just by the fact of being there at a bar at night. That people were suspicious that she was trying to like hook up with every band member. Then there's the question of, even now at festivals, if you look at the roster, gender parity is very rare, just on a bill of who's playing. And that's certainly true in old time and folk scenes, as well as all kinds of other music. So we know that women aren't getting hired as much. Or even women-fronted bands are not getting hired as much. What else? And that flows into everything else. It's like who's getting awards. Yeah, everything. And then historically, going back also to, further in the past, behind Hazel Dickens' experiences in the 70s, 80s, 90s, to women who are performing really in the early days, the 30s, the 20s, the early days of country music, the early days of recording. These women were sometimes discouraged by their own families or their own communities from traveling and sharing music with other people, because it was seen as this kind of risky behavior. In the same way, like they didn't want maybe their daughter to be out there on the road, who knows where. It wasn't seen as a very safe thing to do, maybe, or maybe it wasn't seen as a very proper thing for a woman to do. And then beyond that very overt external pressure, there's also just that Texas Gladden, incredible folk singer, she, had a choice put before her of, you could maybe go out and perform at this festival, and yet she had 9 children. So, if one of them gets sick and she's pulled to stay home, that's her decision, and it makes a lot of sense for her. So it being difficult to get childcare, I mean, that's that's something I'm dealing with still, as a mom in music. So it's there's a lot of factors, I think, that go into it. Okay, so very many. I know I mentioned Rhiannon Giddens, and one thing I love about her work is that she's not afraid to reach into all kinds of genres in her work, and she doesn't feel like that detracts from her work in traditional music. In fact, it adds, and that's wonderful. Sheila K. Adams was a teacher of mine, and just someone who's very dear to me in terms of teaching me songs, storytelling, and who was very encouraging to me as a young singer, saying, yes, learn these songs, yes, take them out and share them. That's really lovely. Jean Ritchie, someone similar. I got to meet her a couple of times, but this incredible songwriter, incredible scholar. She got a Fulbright to study the connections of her family music to music in Ireland and Scotland. It's so inspiring. She wrote these beautiful books, and she was this incredible singer. And having met her a couple of times, again, just that generosity of encouraging new people to get into this old music. So I hold that very close. Ginny Hawker is another person like that who is very encouraging to me at a young age, just saying, yes, sing out, definitely perform, of course, get out there. And this, amazing generosity to encourage other singers. That's something that I really just so appreciate, in addition to their incredible music. And as to what drew me to this music, the music itself, like the melodies, the words, this very ancient poetry, the way they fit together, it's songs that I just really love to sing. And in addition to that, I've found over time, it also has given me a wonderful connection to the place where I grew up. So connecting to other musicians or other people who are just interested in local history, and a really cool like rootedness even to people who lived there in the past, a connection there. It's been really, really, really lovely. I'm very lucky in that I have had a mix of teachers who are living and that you can ask questions of and that you can say hi to when you see them again, and you can talk about the songs and what they mean to you. It's this wonderful blessing. And I think there's things that you can learn in person that are difficult to learn from a recording. But at the same time, those teachers, I think, have actually helped give me the tools to go into archival recordings, field recordings, just very old recordings, and learn songs from singers that have passed on. And there's something really, really exciting about that for me as well. Just the act of listening to one recording over and over and over and hearing every little detail, that's fun for me. And there's another even layer after that, which is that I've been very lucky to meet some of the descendants of people who have passed on, and I've learned songs from their recordings, but perhaps their grandchild is still living, and you can have some of that connection as you approach someone and say, okay, I never knew your grandma, but I love her music. And then you can have a little exchange of, I never knew that she, made the best pickles, or was a great quilter, or, you get these like details about their personal life. And that changes, I think, something about how you experience the music. For me anyway. I also have all these other associations when I go to like take up that song that maybe I learned from a recording at first, but now I can picture all these other things with it. I think, for the most part, my experience has been really wonderful. Occasionally, I do run into people in my field who maybe assume that I am a little less knowledgeable or a little less competent than I actually am. So situations where maybe someone's like trying to explain to me how a microphone works when I am pretty experienced. I really do know. Or even things that seem small, like having a host on whatever it might be introduce me as a girl. And here are these girls. Well, no. No, I'm far above 18. It's fine to say that I'm a woman. I find that a little like, it's a really small thing, but it's like a small piece of like, maybe not seeing me in as a whole. And then, I spoke a little bit about the challenges of just being a mom and performing. I think it's something I was, kind of aware of before I had a kid, but now it's really stark. You can see just not a lot of venues are set up with that in mind. There's a lot of bars where you can't bring a kid, right? It's actually illegal to bring a child in. How will that work? So, maybe you're trying to go to a show, you want to bring someone who can just watch your child while you perform, but then at the same time, like, okay, they need their extra room, you have to travel with them. Even just as simple as like, oh wow, I have to, find, just looking for someone to like do childcare. And realizing like, oh gosh, if I lived in, say, France, I would have a year or 2 or 3 of like paid leave from work. So I wouldn't feel like I had to jump right back in, before I'm ready. I would have a little bit of like, more relaxed time to figure out like, okay, what's next? And how does this really make sense for my life, rather than, oh my gosh, I just haven't been working and so I haven't been earning. And that's it. In the gig economy, as a performer, just if you're not working, you don't have the income. And realizing that in other places it's not always like that. That's definitely been a challenge that I've become more aware of in the last couple of years. And like some of it is like, hey, becoming a parent was my choice, and that's great, and I don't expect everything to be easy, but also just knowing that there's like other ways of doing it, and that is like working fine. It's like, I think there's something kind of embedded in our minds that like children and work do not mix, like the world of the home and like the family and the children is like, oh, it doesn't belong, in the work world, in the professional world. And I think I'm starting to realize like how now that divide seems a little more artificial. Like, oh, well, why wouldn't I just maybe bring my child to some performances, or why wouldn't like things be set up in a way that, you can have a little less like stark separation. And I also see, some women who are out there like totally rocking it and touring with their kids. So, and I should say, it's not something we love to talk about, but just one final piece of challenges we face as women in the industry is, thankfully, this has been very rare for me personally, but I've seen it so much with my colleagues who are women, is that there are moments when women aren't safe. It's been very, very, very rare for me that I've ever had a moment where I didn't feel safe, but I have had unwanted attention from audience members, maybe been getting into a conversation that I didn't really feel like I could get out of because I feel like I, have to engage. And I'm not going to tell other people's stories, but my colleagues have experienced much, much worse, about as bad as you can imagine, from like unwanted touching to, lots of other things. So it's a real thing. And it happens when, especially, there's men in a position of power over women, and sometimes they exploit that. It's a real thing, it's not fun to talk about, but it really happens. And I know lots of women that it's happened to. Well, that's a very big question, obviously. And I don't think I can answer the whole thing. The best that I can do to wrap my head around that big why question, like why is it that way, is that I think it's a mirror to the larger culture, or a mirror to the larger history of, music, as we could say, but really reaching into, all kinds of areas as you look through even your standard like history textbook. It's just been that way. It's been told through that frame, focusing on the men and what the men have done for so long, that it is really actually a big effort. It's a bigger effort to work against that and to try to open up outside of that frame. And the same is, obviously true racially, or for stories that are not, heteronormative. It's not just, about women and men, but it's also about non-binary people and queer people, people that are not white. All of that is kind of like outside that frame. And that's an even bigger, big sort of question, a big thing to tackle. But shifting that frame in any way, I think, is helpful. Well, I talked about how impactful it was for me, and still is for me, to see women performing or doing what they do, just showing their work. And so I'm hoping that by, sharing my own work, that by performing, hopefully I'm just adding to that representation. So if someone sees themselves in me and what I'm doing, then that's really great. I've also found that I really enjoy teaching. That's something I've, done a lot of workshops, and in the last few years, especially with COVID and having a child, I've been doing a lot of teaching one-on-one online lessons. That's something I really like. I like passing this music on to other people through teaching, and passing on some of my enthusiasm, hopefully, for this music. So I actually think that almost anybody, just by doing it in their own voice, is really innovating. Whether that's like a big like tidal shift, or just a small, like another stone in the river. I think it all changes the course of how this music moves forward, and that's a really beautiful thing. And with that in mind, I try to remember, as I make new work, or maybe think about trying something that's experimental, adding an instrument that wouldn't normally be there, or adding visual art to a ballad, to sort of bring my vision, more out front. I try to remember that there's lots of room for experimentation. There's always lots of people that are learning and teaching something in a very preservationist way. That's really valuable. And even I do that sometimes. And there's also lots of room for experimentation. So trying to, just to feel what's right in the moment, I guess. Maybe the early barn dance stars, it's like this whole giant crew of men, right? And then like, oop, here's Our Lady, and that's like, right, they're tokenizing women, right? They're like, oh, we do have a woman, here she is. Isn't she beautiful? Like, here's the dress we got her to wear, and ain't she cute? And just kind of, minimizing, and all the reasons that we know that tokenizing is not good, of which there are many. And then, it also makes me think of, if you've heard the Dolly Parton podcast, but the story of how she, broke away from the Porter Wagoner show, and that relationship that never quite became equal. And she had to make a very courageous decision that was the right one, so that she could have more autonomy over her own songs. And there was a cost to it. I think she ended up paying Porter Wagoner like $1 million or something totally insane, because of that split. But, in the end, that paid off for her in a big way. So thinking about that, and then trying to apply that, I don't actually think I don't think I felt that pressure so much in my own life to like perform something that doesn't feel like me. Maybe I can think of one or two times, and definitely it's like uncomfortable and weird, and sometimes I'm sure this is different for every personality, but like for me, it's like, it's not till like after that experience is over that I realize, oh, that felt bad, but why? It takes a little like turning of the gears to sort of like realign myself with like, oh, it's because like I wasn't being authentic and someone was like pressuring me to do something else. I think thankfully for me that has been rare. And I think actually that has gotten better. That's something that I observe. Like there is a lot more variety. Um, and I don't want to be one of these people that says like it's the technology, but maybe it is that a lot more people have cameras in their own hands. There's a lot more diversity in terms of who can just self-produce their own message without needing a ton of input from a production crew or like someone to direct and give the go ahead and, you know, be the person that's overseeing those decisions. One thing is that like the more events you have, you know, festivals, performances, art shows, et cetera, where you hire a bunch of women, the more women are like getting paid for their work, the more they're getting that encouragement to, you know, practice and make something that they can bring out and show. The more they're encouraged to, develop their craft. The more you can look at the events you're already planning and check for gender parity and see like, are we hiring as many women as we are men? Like it is harder because we have to really like dig and hit the bricks more. And I know this from even just from organizing events myself. That you'd have to dig in order to try to make it equitable. So it's harder, but that's a great thing to do. Pressuring other institutions and establishments to do the same thing. Like at conferences where like a lot of people who run festivals or performance series are all together, like having it be a topic like, oh, so what's everybody doing to make sure that there's plenty of women being hired? I think that could be a great shift to happen. I think encouraging people to make use of the technology that they have, and I think getting women in front of girls to show them what's possible, or setting up mentoring that can happen. That can be really powerful. I tend to like go with the flow a little bit more. I don't have like, you know, some big like imagined future. I do imagine like my dream is that like every venue, festival, and conference has like free daycare and stuff like that. That's a fantasy that's definitely like very closely related to my own life currently. I mean, I guess the dream is also that you never have to think about like, you know, like it doesn't occur to you. You're just like, here we are at a normal festival, and you're not looking around being like, I can't believe there's so many women here, or I can't believe there's no other women here. I guess I would just list some like cool women that I know about. Nora Brown, amazing, so inspiring. And I love listening to her music. She's just an amazing collaborator. I think that she treats the music in such a thoughtful and also intuitive way. She obviously has so much, you know, respect for the people that she's learned from, but a really strong sense of her own interpretations. A+. I'm really loving everything that Amethyst Kia is doing. really enjoying her music. And what else? Maybe it's fine to stop there. It's okay. I don't have to think of everyone. Oh, Carla Gover in Kentucky is like doing she's been doing like just such cool work for decades, interdisciplinary, like multimedia, cross-cultural, everything about her work is so cool. Susan Pepper, as an educator and as a performer, is just, she's just so connected to this amazing repertoire of music and like people that she's met, and passes it along in such a heartfelt way. So I really admire what they're doing as well. Honestly, I don't like telling anybody what they should care about when it's like a particular kind of music. I do think it's a helpful, no matter what kind of music you're interested in, it's a helpful context to have for the rest of just American music in general. So you being the country music, birthplace of country music museum, if you're interested in country music, yeah, definitely check out old time music, get into it. I bet there's going to be something in there that you find exciting. And that's really like the only reason. It's like, if you're going to enjoy it, if you're going to learn something from it that you didn't know before, for me, I enjoy it because I love the music and I love the area, I love the people that play that music. Some of them are my neighbors, some of them are my friends, some of them are my family members. I love that sense that I get from old time music, that it is for anybody that cares to play it. Even if you're a beginner, even if you're a young child, you will generally be really welcomed in to play, even with the best players. I've found that sense of like generosity and just openness, and that it's a kind of music that is not, reserved for people who know a lot. It's the kind of music that you can make in your home just for fun. And that's really kind of the point. You don't have to be like some incredible top level player or singer or whatever it is. It gives the impression that music is to enjoy in day-to-day life. And I find that very, very important.